effect that humans are having on the world right now, it's not a natural thing.
I feel like there's this gap between where or how much we're willing to go to care.
Our generation is the one that has to fix the problem for the future generations.
Ah, planet Earth. Pretty cool view from out here. As of right now, this is our home, and it's all we have. It probably isn't news to you, but things are changing. Temperatures are getting hotter, and 2015 was the warmest year on modern record. And it's in the Arctic, where it's easiest to see and measure. I'm in one of the coldest and most remote places in the world to see firsthand how global warming is changing this place. And even though it's thousands of miles away from most Americans, it may have a bigger impact on you than you might think. Global warming is causing our climate and our world to change. See, for millions of years, the Earth's climate has gone up and down, cycling from ice ages to warmer periods. But in the last century, the planet's temperature has risen really fast.
Since the 1920s, we started seeing warming, and then since the 1980s, that warming's been unprecedented in the context of the last several thousand years. It used to be that we thought that climate would affect ice sheets and ecosystems in centuries or millennia, and instead we're seeing it all happen in decades, and I think that that's pretty alarming for the scientific community.
Ever since the Industrial Revolution began in the late 18th century, factories, power plants, and later cars have burned fossil fuels, mainly oil and coal, which release large amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere. These gases trap heat from the sun, causing our planet to warm in what is known as the greenhouse effect. And we're at the highest levels of carbon dioxide in millions of years.
The additional warming that we've seen in recent decades is almost entirely human-caused. It's warming really rapidly compared to the episodes of warming and cooling that we've seen in the long-term record. There is no other way that science can explain it other than increased greenhouse gases.
Okay, but is a warmer Earth really that big of a deal? Well, yeah, because the climate is changing too rapidly for humans to adapt. Some studies suggest subtle changes over decades, while others predict there could be catastrophic changes in just the next few years. The Earth has already warmed almost halfway to what scientists say is a tipping point for climate change, a 2 degrees Celsius rise in temperature, or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Warming beyond that tipping point could multiply the effects of climate change, heating the Earth even faster, causing sea levels to rise and flooding coastal cities, changing weather patterns to create stronger storms and more severe droughts. And that can affect the food we're able to grow, where we can live, even our health. It's such a concern for officials here that the Department of Defense has listed climate change as a threat to national security.
Let's talk about climate change.
All of this with the global warming and a lot of it's a hoax.
And while American politicians might debate over the cause of it, most scientists don't. At least 97% of climate scientists agree human activity is warming our planet and causing our climate to change.
It's actually fairly ironic that if humans didn't exist on Earth right now, we'd actually be heading towards an ice age.
And most Americans agree. In 2015, Americans' denial of climate change hit a record low, 16%. Now the argument is how to slow it down. Environmentalists say drastic changes in how we provide energy are needed. Economists say small changes could work. And a lot of that responsibility is going to fall on this generation. So we wanted to know just how climate change is already affecting Americans.
Right there, there's usually like flowers and stuff there, and that's all dead.
Because they can't be watered.
No.
It hasn't been the same. We haven't been able to have our normal day lives that we did before the storm.
So over the next few weeks, we'll take you where our research brought us, from the ice to the desert to the sea, to see how climate change is reshaping our world and our future. Keith Kosinski, Channel 1 News. The Arctic, the top of the world, home to the North Pole, where only the most daring have gone, and toughest call home. But this ice world is changing.
This region is at that critical threshold of balancing between frozen and unfrozen. The entire environment changes.
The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. And like a domino effect, it can create other changes that will impact the entire planet.
No one can know for sure what's going to happen, but all the models are suggesting that our world is going to be a different place.
We wanted to see what was happening firsthand, so we began our journey north, from the CH1 studios in the Big Apple to the Canadian capital, Ottawa. There we met up with over 100 high school and college students, plus dozens of climate experts and scientists from around the world, all part of the annual Students on Ice journey to the Arctic.
All right, here we go.
We then jetted northeast over 1,700 miles from Ottawa to Greenland.
As we're getting ready to land here in Greenland, I'm looking out the window and the landscape just looks like something from a different planet.
During the summer, much of the ice in this area disappears.
We've arrived in Greenland!
So once we land, we begin a hunt for ice that's existed for thousands of years.
This is the Greenland ice sheet. It covers most of Greenland, and it's one of the biggest ice sheets in the world. It is also ground zero when it comes to climate change. In the case this ice sheet were to completely melt, it could raise sea levels by more than 20 feet worldwide.
Ice sheets are enormous, growing over thousands of years as layers of snow pile up into thick masses. The Greenland ice sheet is more than 650,000 square miles, 3 times the size of Texas. Only the Antarctic ice sheet is bigger, 8 times larger. Combined, they hold 99% of the world's freshwater ice. But measurements show the Greenland ice sheet is shrinking, and shrinking ice means rising sea levels.
Worldwide, it implies that areas with massive populations along coastal regions will have to relocate perhaps to other countries. So, there could potentially be major conflict.
It's not likely all of the ice is going to go away anytime soon, but the question is, as it melts, how much of it's going to spill into the oceans? Over the last century, sea levels have gone up by 8 inches. And studies project sea levels to rise another 1 to 6 feet by the year 2100.
So it's actually some meltwater right there from this iceberg. I know it might be on a small scale, but that's what's contributing to sea level rise right there.
That's because scientists say there's a good chance this iceberg came from a glacier. They can break off into the ocean and cause water to rise. We then arrive at Surmullik National Park. From above, you can see the edge of the Surmullik Glacier. And here's where it used to be 50 years ago, over a mile of retreat.
This is a point where the glacier actually existed only a few years ago. Right now, this glacier is losing significantly more volume of ice than it's gaining. Most glaciers throughout the world are in a state of retreat. They're unhealthy, they're getting thinner, they're getting shorter.
It's not just the ice melting and flowing into the ocean that changes the climate. This newly exposed bare soil and rock suck up more heat and make things even warmer. And as sea ice melts, the oceans warm even further, because the ice reflects the sun's hot rays back into space, like a natural deflector shield. Without it, the ocean absorbs more heat and carbon dioxide. Over the last 9 years, sea ice has dwindled to record lows each summer.
We actually have examples of a large number of forms of life that existed before couldn't live anymore.
As more fresh water melts into ocean water, it can change ocean currents, which then changes the climate and weather patterns.
When you have these huge meltwater fluxes into the North Atlantic, you can change ocean circulation, and you can make certain areas of the North Europe colder.
So it's something to keep an eye on right now.
Yeah.
It's why so many scientists are focused on the ice at the top and bottom of our world, because all this melting ice is causing a snowball effect, speeding up the Earth's warming, changing the climate, which affects wildlife, and of course, humans.
We're seeing increased levels of typhoons and hurricanes. We're seeing drought conditions. We're seeing things are changing.
There'll be a lot of questions for civilization. If there isn't something put in place to be able to help people adapt, then yeah, there'll be crises, human crises, yeah.
Tomorrow, we check out how one group of students is working hard to avoid crisis. Keith Kosinski, Channel 1 News.
Who wants to start digging?
When I started the day today, I didn't realize I'd be doing so much physical labor. But Daniel and I are here and we're digging away. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. Ice piles up in layers.
Looking at the long-term trends in snowfall amounts is a great tie-in to how the climate's changing.
And as these students dig deeper into the water content of these layers of ice, in an actual glacier, a story sometimes thousands of years old is written about what happened at that time.
We have to measure how much water is coming into a glacier in order to determine whether or not that glacier is going to grow or shrink.
It's also an indicator of what the future may hold. And in the Arctic, it's important because some glaciers could vanish. For students here, it could even happen in their lifetime. And that's one of the reasons why they're here. Students on Ice, an organization founded 15 years ago, brings over 100 students from around the world to the Arctic to see this up close.
It was a really simple idea to use the Arctic and the Antarctic at the other end of the world as classrooms, because they truly are incredible places to learn about the global ecosystem, about politics, about culture, and how interconnected our planet is.
Students here spend nearly 2 weeks on the high seas with dozens of experts visiting some of the most remote places on our planet.
Oh, I see the surface.
With one goal in mind: protect the poles, protect the planet.
How has your experience been so far?
My experience has been amazing. It's been awesome to see glaciers. I don't really see any of this stuff back in New Jersey.
Being able to touch the icebergs, drink the glacial water, which is delicious by the way, it really put a very visual effect to climate change.
This region is warming faster than most around the planet, and students say they could sense it.
What is the scariest thing you've seen here in relation to climate change?
When I first decided to come on this trip to come to the Arctic, I was not expecting to see almost no ice, to have these people in their t-shirts. So it seems kind of odd to me that that's happening.
It may feel nice, but the risk associated with a warming world isn't something to mess with. And the issue is how fast this change is happening. Changes that usually happen over thousands of years are happening over centuries and decades.
Applying the label climate change to something makes it seem slow, maybe even a little bit natural. Climate chaos, on the other hand, that's something you have to deal with right away.
And there's this ongoing issue of when will we stop and when will we learn before consequences are too late.
Because these students say our country, our world, is not addressing climate change fast enough, and politics is getting in the way.
The world is not doing enough. Making it a very political issue has unfortunately impeded the capacity to put forward sensible, thoughtful, innovative climate policy.
I think the number of young people staring into their cell phones, not really caring about the world, leads to a huge disconnection from the world, and I think that's why I'm here right now, is because I need to be able to have that connection.
On this ship, students are without cell phones and have no access to the outside world. Instead, they learn about the region and put their brains together to think of ways to help solve these challenges.
Policy is one of the most important ways that we can make a difference. And that means talking with older people when you get the chance. It means writing letters to politicians. It means making your voice heard.
The question is what we do now. Assigning blame is one thing, but moving on is another thing. What's so nice about this trip is that you've got all these young people who, are full of energy and full of great questions and creative in the way that they approach things. And so I'm pretty hopeful for the future.
These students are already working toward a greener planet. While in high school, Robert used a combination of brain power and ingenuity to build his own electric car. And Alice, a student from Vancouver, Canada, recently spoke at a sustainability conference in front of hundreds of people.
I think that we will be able to offset climate change and the doom that everyone has already laid out for us, and that we can eventually get back onto the path that we're supposed to be on.
Alaska 2014. Kids had their winter fun in gravel instead of snow. Boston 2015. The city was blasted by 4 blizzards in 1 month, busting the snowiest record and burying parts of the city under 6 feet of snow. New York City this past Christmas. People wore t-shirts instead of winter coats. Feeling the whiplash? Well, this extreme, unpredictable weather could become the norm.
Climate change is causing a lot of unfortunate, disastrous impacts around the world.
A report studied 28 extreme weather events, like droughts, heat waves, floods, and wildfires around the world in 2014. Half were found to be made worse, in part by climate change. Scientists say climate change doesn't create weather events, but intensifies them.
Some people say, well, how can the planet be warming if we had such a cold winter? What do you say to that?
That's an easy thing to misunderstand. The weather in your backyard for a short period of time isn't necessarily going on around the world all the time.
Several recent studies suggest that melting ice in the Arctic is changing water currents, which in turn is changing the jet stream. That's the river of strong air currents that circle the globe. Researchers say the jet stream in the northern hemisphere is slowing down, leaving weather events in places longer and becoming wavier, making weather less predictable.
Everything slows, and with it, weather patterns persist over areas for longer periods of time. That could make a wet situation dangerously wet. It could make a heat wave dangerously long.
Longer, hotter stretches, deeper freezes, more rain and snowfall totals. Scientists say the hotter the globe gets, the more extreme the weather.
With climate change, do we expect to see an increase in extreme weather across the country and across the world?
The weather that we experience is still governed and will still be governed by the same physics that kind of governs our weather now. The role that climate change will play in big weather events like this is how often do the ingredients come together, and in what ways, and at what times of the year, what times of day. You know, those are the types of changes that we're likely to see.
It's how those ingredients come together that makes it tough to predict. The way scientists put it, there's a confidence scale. There's a high confidence that climate change affects extreme hot and cold temps, like the heat wave in India last year that has been blamed for thousands of deaths. There's medium confidence that climate change is linked to more rain and snow, and severe droughts like the mega drought in California. And on the lower end of the confidence scale, hurricanes, wildfires, and tornadoes, meaning there's less evidence there's a clear link to climate change.
Climate change won't change the ingredients that come together to make hurricanes, but it may change how often they come together, when they come together, where they come together. Climate change is already bringing more episodes of big heat, which is very dangerous in the summer, and big rain, which can produce the flash flooding, which are consistent killers in the United States. So those are two facets. There are many kind of facets to climate change, but those are two facets from an extreme weather standpoint that we need to keep an eye on.
And over the next few days, we'll show you how scientists are keeping their eye on extreme weather and meet people already feeling the impact. Keith Kosinski, Channel 1 News. Scorching heat. Devastating droughts. Wildfires burning out of control. Some of the biggest threats to our future in a warming world.
The simple definition for drought is when we don't have enough water to do what we need. The drought is dangerous because it is a creeping hazard. It basically, you don't know it's there until it's there.
No one knows this better than the people in the Golden State. The nearly 40 million people in California are dealing with an intense 5-year drought, one of the biggest in modern history, costing billions of dollars a year. For some people, it's so bad their faucets have dripped to a halt.
Every drop counts, no matter if you're in a drought or not.
For 18-year-old Julian and her family in Tuolumne, California, this drought is hitting close to home.
Normally there'd be about 10 feet of water in this well, but if you look down here now, during the drought, there's only about 18 inches, which is pretty much nothing at all.
It's important to monitor because on some days, their well totally runs dry.
Would you say it's pretty stressful not having water?
Yeah, because you really got to watch you got to really pay attention to what you're doing. It's just this hassle not being in your own home setting and not being able to shower and drink water when you want to. You got to really conserve because you just want to grab a glass and get water, and you can't do that when there's no water to use.
From timed showers to collecting water in buckets at every faucet, no drop is lost at Julian's house.
Like brushing my teeth and putting makeup on, it's pretty difficult. Usually you just use this to rinse it out and then rinse your mouth out. You're putting this on. Sometimes it gets on my hands. So after I'm done, I usually just use this. And your hands are clean.
So all with the same water?
All with the same water that you brush your teeth with.
And everyone is pitching in with some pretty interesting ways of saving some H2O.
So what is that, Jordan?
I call it my sleeping cap, and it helps me keep my hair down at night so I don't wake up with crazy hair and have to use water to wet it down and comb it.
As we drive around Julian's neighborhood, the signs of drought are apparent. Even on her school's campus, reminders are all around.
Right there. There's usually flowers and stuff there, and that's all dead.
Because they can't be watered.
No, it can't be watered. None of this is watered.
So is this extreme weather event connected with a changing climate? Well, scientists say it's difficult to say climate change caused the drought. Instead, they say a warming Earth is making droughts more intense.
The concern with climate change is that certain parts of the world, especially the drought-prone parts of the world, will likely see an increased risk of either more frequent or longer-lasting drought. Water availability is probably one of the biggest risks and vulnerabilities that we see in a warming world.
And rising temperatures and changing weather patterns are also causing dangerous heat waves when temperatures soar for days on end. Last week, the White House released a report that said heat wave deaths could worsen by 2030 due to climate change, killing thousands more. And a lack of water and scorching temps are also prime ingredients to spark these. Two of the three biggest wildfires in California's history happened over the last 5 years. Many in California are working to adapt. The government now restricts how much water residents can use. Homeowners are replacing grass with more desert-friendly landscaping. New ways of irrigating are being looked at, as over 80% of California's water is used to grow food and for livestock. Luckily, for the first few months of 2016, California has been drenched with rain and snow caused by a weather event called El Nino. This has helped to recharge many reservoirs and get water to those who need it the most. But the state needs much more to recover. Many areas are still considered to be at extreme or exceptional drought levels. In Julian's community, those in most desperate need require huge tanks to store thousands of gallons of water that's trucked in.
Hauling drinking water in a truck is not the long-term solution. I think for years we've needed to change the way we use water. The silver lining is this will force that change.
On this day, Mike's crew is making a special delivery.
Having a tank, I think, is going to help out a lot. They're not going to have to deal with the stress of constantly conserving water.
It's great news for Julian and her family, but only a temporary solution to what is going to be a long-term change. Keith Kosinski, Channel 1 News. For 15-year-old Jack Helms, water is his world. When he's not catching the surf here on the New Jersey shore, he's snapping some sick pics. But in 2012, water turned his life upside down.
I try to push it out of my mind, not let it get to me. Because the worst thing that could happen was is me being mad at the ocean, which is the last thing I want. All I can say was, wow, the ocean that I've knew did that damage. It's kind of scary to think about.
So something that provided you with so much joy also provided you with so much sorrow?
Yeah, pretty much.
On October 29th, 2012, New Jersey and New York City were hit by the storm of the century, Superstorm Sandy, leaving behind billions of dollars of damage and claiming the lives of over 100 people in the U.S.
First day I saw my house after the storm. It's probably the thing I'm going to remember the most. It looked like a bunch of islands surrounded by water. It definitely wasn't a happy thing to see at all.
Hurricane force winds, intense rain, and massive surges of water wiped out entire neighborhoods. Jack's home, over a half-mile from the ocean, was overtaken by water.
We're about to walk under the foundation, or where it was. Salt water from the ocean when it flooded just completely came in and destroyed our foundation.
3 years later, and his family was still rebuilding.
Where we're at right now, would this area have been flooded?
Yes, yeah.
So we would be standing in floodwater right now.
You would be holding your breath underwater.
This flooding was caused by a combination of high tide and storm surge, when a storm pushes a large amount of water onto land.
We've never experienced and measured a storm surge like the one that Sandy produced. The incoming water surged to a height of greater than 10 feet above astronomical tides.
Floods are the #1 natural disaster in the United States, defined simply as there being too much water for waterways to hold. But as the Earth continues to warm, scientists say flooding could become more common. See, the warm weather is causing the ice to melt at the Earth's poles, adding more water into our oceans and seas. Sea levels have risen by 8 inches worldwide since 1880. In some places like Galveston, Texas, it's gone up by 25 inches. There are even some parts of the U.S. that flood just during high tide.
Here in New York City, where 520 miles of shoreline are at risk, emergency managers are working on future plans to reduce the impacts of storm surge and sea level rise over the next couple decades.
In New York, we've got about 3.9 million people that live in a surge area. And so that's a lot of people.
New York City officials are working on a $100 million plan to protect residents from flooding dangers, including building storm surge barriers and improving landscaping to redirect floodwater. But climate change isn't just raising sea levels. Scientists say it's also causing more rain in some areas, which can lead to another kind of flood. Flash floods, when heavy rain comes so quickly and lasts so long that it can sweep away cars and homes. Last month, at least 5 people died and thousands had to flee their homes across the South as several days' worth of heavy rain caused extreme flooding in places like Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi.
A warmer atmosphere can hold a lot more water vapor, and when a warmer atmosphere can hold a lot more water vapor, it can deliver a lot more rain. The rain that we get in the U.S., and especially the eastern U.S., is coming in bigger doses. So we're getting more rain at once, and the big rain is actually getting bigger for most places.
On average, the United States is getting 6% more precipitation than it did 100 years ago. Will we soon live in a water world where one of our most vital resources becomes one of our most feared enemies? It may take some time, but it could be one of the extreme challenges we face in a warming world.
I don't want to have storms like Sandy be the norm. It's really the last thing anyone wants.
Keith Kosinski, Channel 1 News.